What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Purpose and Passion Podcast. This is episode 20. I've gotten to 20 now. It's mid-August right now. I'm sorry, it's the beginning of August right now. I don't even know what day or month it is anymore in 2020. But it's the beginning of August, and I started this podcast right at the beginning of the year. I can't remember if episode 1 was in January or February. I would have liked to have been well beyond episode 20 by now, having been beyond halfway in the year. But getting one episode done a week has proven to be pretty difficult with everything I have on my plate. I could chalk it up to the year specifically with what's going on, but being self-employed and everything else I've got on my plate, it's just been really difficult to have different guests on, friends specifically, that I'd like to have on the podcast. Living in the middle of New Hampshire doesn't make it any easier either, because I have to travel no matter who I want on the podcast. Corey Marshall lives like an hour south of me, so it's easier to have him on regularly if I'm not out of town or I don't have somebody in town to be on the podcast. And having somebody here makes it so much easier for conversation and for content to flow. I am coming to you in episode 20 solo from my house, in my recording studio here in my house. So I don't like doing the solo ones because I'm not that good at podcasting yet. I feel like I'm pretty natural when it comes to sitting down and talking with friends and not being shy with a microphone or a camera in front of me or anything like that. I like just being comfortable with my friends, and whenever I have a different friend on the podcast, Corey's gotten really good at it over the past year or 6 months of doing the podcast, because he's been able to do a couple episodes with me and just get more comfortable having a microphone in front of him. And yeah, we just hang out for an hour or two. So when I've got other friends on who haven't been on podcasts, it's almost like I try to precursor the episode with them. I'm like, listen, we're just going to hang out for an hour or two, pretend like it's just you and I in the room and we're just having a normal conversation. So being alone, I haven't gotten into that solo rhythm yet of being able to just talk to a camera, talk to a microphone alone here in my studio as if you all are here with me. And yeah, so that's kind of difficult, and I don't feel any anxiety before I record these, I guess, but I try to make sure I've got more notes in front of me, because it's real easy for me to rabbit trail off into the distance, and then I get lost and I forget where I was going. And yeah, there's no one to kind of steer me back. So here we are, episode 20. This one's going to be a short one, as the solo ones usually are, so I don't get lost just with dead space or just be, saying or like, and just stuff you guys don't want to hear if I am in your headphones at the moment. So basically all I'm going to do in this episode is just kind of cover some news, stuff that I've been up to, and notably some Instagram Q&As. It is currently Monday evening, and yesterday, Sunday, I put out an Instagram story asking for some questions, because I meant to record this last night, but it was a pretty busy weekend and I just didn't have the time to get all my stuff set up. All my podcast recording gear stays in my Pelican case. Usually when I've done a podcast somewhere else, when I get home, I usually keep it packed up in my Pelican case in case I end up doing the next episode somewhere that's not here and everything's already loaded up. So this morning I set everything up here. If you're watching on YouTube, first of all, if you're watching from YouTube, you will more than likely notice the mustache is back. And if you've known me long enough, you know that I fluctuate. My facial hair is like girls who go through like emotional roller coasters when they like dye their hair or they cut their hair super short. I just, a lot of girlfriends that I know, if they go through like a traumatic, just like, losing their job or starting a new job or, going through a breakup, anything stressful, a lot of the girls I know like do something drastic with their hair. This is not spurred on by any sort of emotional roller coaster I'm currently on. It's about due. I'm about time for another mustache. So sorry, ladies. Or you're welcome, ladies. I don't know which is good and which is bad. Also, I am sipping on the Stoke Chocolate Cold Brew this evening. Nice evening coffee. I also want to put the plug out before I forget. I've been meaning to put this out on Instagram, but as most of you know, I am a root beer connoisseur and I collect root beer bottles. And what I want to do is I want to integrate more like beverages, stuff that I'm excited about with the podcast, but including you guys. What I want to do is through Instagram, if you have a local root beer or just a root beer that you can buy in your area that you think I haven't had, which is really difficult because I've had almost all of them, message me on Instagram. And if you are so inclined to mail me some root beer, I will review it and shout you out on the podcast. I'm going to put this out on Instagram too, because that's where the most audience is at the moment. So more people will see that. But I think it'll be fun because when I first started the podcast, even when it was just an initial inception of an idea for a podcast, I'd always told my friends I really wanted to include like root beer or coffee or something into the podcast, where at the beginning of each episode, even if I had a guest on, I'd kind of talk about the brew that we were having during the podcast episode or something. So so message me on Instagram if you are into this idea. If you want to mail me some root beer, I will review it on the podcast episodes and let you know if I've had it, obviously, what I think of it, if I like it or not. Or if it's one that I haven't had, that'll be a spotlight one for sure, because I've had most of them. And so, message me on Instagram. I'll give you my address, mail me some root beer, and we'll integrate that into the podcasts. But to not breeze over the mustache, yes, the mustache is back. Last time I grew a mustache out was in 2018 for a month-long trip in Europe. And most of my friends I was staying with in Germany have mustaches, and they jokingly said that they require I have a mustache to come stay with them in Germany. So I obliged them and grew one out. And the summer of 2018 is when I lost about 30 pounds. So I cleaned up my diet, lost a lot of weight, and I have not had a mustache since then. So here we are. Basically, at 35 years old, I keep myself pretty clean shaven because I look like I'm 25 instead of 35. Luckily, I'm super grateful for that. I haven't lost any of my hair. And I've got a decent, young looking complexion, sort of say, I guess. I haven't really abused my body too badly. BMX has definitely beat me up. But yeah, so I've been hanging on to the looking as young as possible game for the last couple of years. But I'm not trying to impress anybody, so here we are. I look like I'm a proper dad with a mustache now. So sipping on this Chocolate Stoke cold brew right now. It is about 8 p.m. Monday night, just relaxing. If you are, again, watching on YouTube, you'll notice I'm in a different part of my studio right now. Normally, I've got a sofa in here with the Purpose and Passion podcast sign behind it on the wall. That's usually super comfortable, but I wanted to switch it up a little bit. I'm in the corner of my studio where I record my music. So I've got my iMac, my separate monitor, my keyboard interface, and a few other things. And it was going to be easier to just sit in my chair since Corey wasn't here or I didn't have a guest. So Corey and I met up in Portland, Maine on Saturday, this past Saturday. I left here at 4:30-ish in the morning for the 2-hour drive, just under 2-hour drive out to Portland, Maine. We've been trying to ride BMX every weekend. As most of you know, if you follow me on Instagram, you see that I've been back on my bike hard this year, and it feels amazing. I'm super excited about it. It's done a lot for my health too. Luckily, I've been careful. I haven't been pushing my limits too hard, so I haven't spent too much time injured, but focusing on cardio, which is good. So we met up in Portland. I hadn't ridden that skate park in years. Portland had an old wooden skate park right off the highway in like a parking lot that really wasn't much, but I'd been out there a few times. I think the last time I was out there riding BMX was 2002. I was a junior or senior. I ended my junior year early 2002, started my senior year in 2002. And that summer we'd gone out to Portland, and that was the last time I actually rode street in Portland. But in, I want to say 2009 or 10, Portland put in a new concrete skate park and had a grand opening. And I went out for the grand opening, and it was like midday, and there were so many kids. There were hundreds of kids, it seemed. It was just packed. And I got like one run in, probably ran into a few different kids because it was so packed, and went home. So this was the first time I'd actually ridden Portland. in 18 years, which is pretty crazy. So I met up with Corey, our friend Austin, who I actually hadn't met yet. He follows me on Instagram, and I'd put a feeler out on Instagram that we were going to be in Portland riding, and if anyone in the area wanted to meet up with us and hang out and ride bikes or skate or whatever, to do so, to meet us up at the, meet up with us at the skate park. And one thing that I really wanted to do, my friend Joanna had said, make sure you go to Holy Donut. It's a donut shop in Portland. I'd never been there. Probably wasn't open the last time I really spent time there. So when we get to the skate park, we met up at like 6 a.m. at the skate park. I looked to see where Holy Donut was. It was right down the street from the skate park. So that was on the agenda. We were going to ride for a while. Obviously, having the first coffee consumed, we were going to get a second coffee at Holy Donut with some donuts, mid-morning probably. And Austin, who had reached out on Instagram, who lives in Portland, said that he was going to try to meet up with us in the morning. And I'd say right around 8 o'clock, he rolled in. I didn't recognize him. I didn't know he was actually going to show up. So down the walkway comes a kid on a BMX bike with a white box, like a white, cardboard box. And I mentioned it to Corey. I'm like, oh, there's another rider here. And then I see him, he's carrying a white box. And I said, what do you want to bet that is a box of donuts? And then as he rolls up, he's like, hey, John, and then introduced himself. And I'm like, oh, hey, what's going on? And he's like, do you guys want donuts? And I'm like, is that Holy Donut by any chance? And he goes, yeah, man, I run their catering. I run their catering van in the morning. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So we were already planning on going to Holy Donut. Austin, who we had never met before, who follows us on Instagram, came through, works at Holy Donut, and brought us a dozen Holy Donut. And it was unbelievable. So huge shout out to Austin for that. Basically read our minds. That was amazing. If you're in Portland, go to Holy Donut. That place is unbelievable. As far as I know, most everything's gluten-free, if not everything. I don't remember completely, but if you go to Holy Donut Maine is their Instagram, I believe, their Instagram handle. So that was amazing. That got the day off. Felt like I had an anchor in my chest for the rest of the day because I ate like 4 of those things, and they are not small. And yeah, so we rode around Portland, rode street, went to a couple spots that I remember riding in 2002 that I actually filmed at. And if you go to my YouTube, youtube.com/John Ludwick, or if you're already here on YouTube, the episode before this, the video before this one, I just went live tonight, this Monday night, with the episode of that day and actually integrated a couple clips from a couple spots when I was 17 years old in 2002 from riding Portland compared to some of the spots that we rode this past weekend as well. So that was super fun. Then Sunday, Corey came up my way and went over to my buddy Danny's house. And Danny, I've posted in my Instagram quite frequently. Danny is a friend of mine who is, I think he's like 42. Yeah, he's 42. He's 7 years older than I am. Got into finance out of high school in the late 90s and did pretty well for himself. He's got a family. His wife is from Norway. They live a couple towns over from me here in New Hampshire. And Danny is a car guy. He's not like a hands-on car guy. He does some stuff himself, but he doesn't have like a workshop, and he doesn't do a lot of like heavy, car modification or restoration work himself. But he really enjoys cars, and he's been investing in cars a lot lately. So he's got a dream setup of cars. Like one would argue like the dream setup of cars. And it's been a small collection that he has acquired, I don't know, in the last like 5 or 6 years, I think is when he got like, I guess basically 5 or 6 years is as long as he's owned the oldest car he's got. But he has in the stable currently a 911 turbo Porsche with like 8,000 original miles on it or something insane on BBS E50s, E50 or E55, something like that. 3-piece most motorsport BBS wheels. He's got my favorite. He's got a Euro spec Ferrari 308 GTB Quattro Valve, and that car is just phenomenal. The Euro spec 308s look so good with those small Euro bumpers, the Euro trim. It's red. I've had the opportunity to drive that car a few times. It's a gated selector, dogleg box car, and it's just a phenomenal car to drive. And to be honest, when I drove that car for the first time in like 2016, I don't want to say I didn't have a euphoric experience. I did in a way, but it didn't like speak to me the way I thought it was going to speak to me, because it was the first time I'd ever driven a Ferrari. But to be honest, it's the type of Ferrari I always wanted to drive. I really didn't have any desire to drive like some new Ferrari that is, I didn't care that it wasn't the fastest car I've ever driven, but it's got a cable clutch, manual brakes. It was just, manual steering. It was just it felt like you were driving a quicker Mark II Volkswagen that had way, way more elegance to it. And in a way, it had a more visceral feeling than I expected, and actually liked that even more. So I fell in love with that car even more when I drove it for the first time. And it wasn't because it was fast, because it really wasn't, incredibly quick or anything like that. But that car just had so much character. And so that's one of my favorite cars he has. But in the last couple of years, he's pulled the trigger on a couple pretty heavy hitting cars. He has a 91 Lamborghini Diablo in black, which is, in my opinion, the best color. That car looks the best in black. So he's got a black Diablo, and he has an 84 Countach in white, which he just acquired, I'd say maybe a year ago or so. And that car is a project car. Corey has been helping him redo a lot of the interior. They've got all the interior out right now. Somebody had gone through that car in the 90s and just bastardized it. Basically, they redid the entire interior with a red boat vinyl. It wasn't even a proper leather anymore. And although some Countaches had a full red interior, this was just a real cheap red interior. So Danny's in the process of redoing all the panels, rewrapping everything in black Italian leather, making it as original and as nice as possible. So Corey's been helping him disassemble everything and get everything modified and put back in the car. So we came up to hang out and work on the Countach, and I didn't have anything going on. So I drove the Century over there. Like I said, he's just next door to me. He's like a 20-minute drive from me. And so we hung out at Danny's all day and hung out with some cool cars. And Danny's always awesome to hang out with. He's very business orientated. I know him on a friend level, but it's funny because every time we hang out, he's always pitching big ideas and investment ideas, and his gears are always turning, and I like that. But I like how we can shut it off too and just be friends. But yeah, I've got a lot of stuff that I've been kind of stewing on, and different ideas and different decisions to make, and because I'm thinking of moving here pretty soon, and so it's good to kind of bounce those ideas off him, because he sees things with different eyes and a different light too. So it was a good day. It was a good weekend. I hope all of you guys had a great weekend too. But that's what we've been up to lately. Things for the move to Tennessee are very fluid right now. In the last week or so, I've really ramped up my motivation level to make that move happen. Obviously, the winters here in New Hampshire have become very taxing on me. I'm only living here because I live close to my family, and I am blessed enough to be able to work out of my dad's shop on my cars. And my dad, has been a fabricator his whole life. He owned an automotive business. And so he's got a garage filled with the tools and machines that I dream to have one day. But I haven't been forced to buy all that machinery because I've been able to use my dad's stuff. So a move isn't just I won't have access to all this stuff anymore. It's that I won't have access to my parents, and to be able to see my parents and learn from my dad too in the shop, because I learn something new basically every day that I'm down there with him. So that's been weighing heavily on me. And, because my dad's one of my best friends, and it's just something that I've been thinking hard a lot about lately. And with the pandemic going on and stuff, it's just, I've been really kind of, praying about it, and really just trying to weigh everything out. Cause although I'm thinking about going to Tennessee, it's not like going, to the West Coast or something. I'd still be driving distance from my parents. I'd be able to get in the car. If I wasn't able to get on a plane, I'm 1 day driving distance back home, which makes me feel a little bit better about that. But I'm transparent with them too. And I see them for dinner. They live right up the street from me. So I see them for dinner pretty frequently. And I'm transparent with them about how I feel. And they've been incredibly helpful with all this, and supportive, and, because they know that here in New Hampshire in the woods, there's not much opportunity here. And I don't have much of a social life here. When I'm home, it's usually to be home to work on some of the cars, and then save up enough money to bail out and go travel and see my friends. So I'd like to live in an area where I kind of have that. And so things right now are looking pretty good for the Chattanooga area of Tennessee. For a while there, I didn't know where I wanted to go. And I could still argue that I still don't. Because I can take the laser machine shop with me, I can basically work from anywhere and not be bound by local economies. Because, I run my business off of Instagram basically and do a lot of, I ship all my products out. And same with the Governors Club too. Any products I make with the Governors Club, I'm always sending out. So it's not like I've got a storefront or I rely on a local economy to thrive or to run my business from. So Mason Gavin has been a huge help. My buddy in Chattanooga who puts on the Riverside show. So shout out to Mason. Mason is now a real estate agent, something that he's been working towards. And this is like the first year he's been full-time with that. So it's been really helpful to have a friend that you trust in real estate while you're looking at moving down there. So I've been spending a lot of time on Zillow and calling him, and he's been super helpful in going to look at some places for me, and having some, boots on the ground down there is super helpful. So I have been pushing Corey. I don't want to say I've been pushing Corey. Corey Marshall, he wants to go south as well. He wants to get out of the Northeast winters. He'd like to start his own shop again. We've always talked about doing some sort of collaborative shop. We've written some stuff down. We've always spitballed ideas, and I know we're going to move on some of those ideas at some point, but I think to be in an area that we both want to be in, somewhere that we don't have to store our cars for 6 months out of the year because of a heavy duty winter, we'll be able to split the cost on a shop or a workshop unit of some kind, and continue individually on our own things. If Corey starts doing his own thing, I can do the laser thing in TGC. And then once we get into a rhythm, we'll ultimately figure out what speaks best for doing something together on some sort of venture. So we're both super, super excited about that. So I haven't wanted to put any pressure on Corey for the move, and never wanted him to feel like I was forcing him to do something that he didn't want to do. So now that we've got it all out on the table, that this is something he really wants to do, and I've started to put the gears in motion more seriously about a move, hopefully this fall, I told him this weekend, I said, yeah, I'm going to put the pressure on now. I'm going to put the pressure on. Because for me, I realize it's easier. I can take my shop with me. My laser shop can go with me. And once I'm there and settled in, I can start working again. For Corey at the moment, he's not in a position where he wants to move down there and start his own thing right off the bat. He wants to go down there and work in a shop and just get money flowing again, get income coming in, and then settle in. So yeah, I understand that with Corey's situation, it's he wants to have some work lined up when he goes down there. So there are a few things in the pipeline right now. So I've basically tried to light the fire under him. I said, listen, I want to go this fall. I want to be down there for October or November, and I'm going to do it, but I'd love if you did it too, and we could split rent on a nicer house that, something that I didn't feel like I'd be stretching myself thin on by myself. And so that's where we're at currently with the move to Tennessee. But I've narrowed it down to where it's looking like, Chattanooga area is where I'm going to be heading, unless something drastically changes. But Chattanooga's on the list. I'd like to make it happen. So when we're down there on October 3rd for Riverside, Mason's show, I'm leaving stuff off down there, coming home empty, and then ultimately moving into a place down there for October or November. So we'll see how that goes. I will keep you guys up to speed, especially my friends down there in Tennessee who I've been talking to about this. But that's basically it for the news. I've got some new TGC stuff on the Governors Club web store. You guys watching on YouTube can probably see this sweet tumbler right here. I've got some new stainless steel 20-ounce drink tumblers that I laser engrave the TGC logo on both sides of. People have been asking me about this ever since the beginning of the Yeti and tumbler phase, or the craze, I should say. And I never did TGC ones just because they're expensive for me to buy too. And I didn't think anyone would want to buy ones that I have laser engraved and done all that too. But so far, I've got a pre-order live right now in the TGC web store. If you're listening to this before August 8th, that's when the pre-order is going to end. So head to the Governors Club web store link on the Governors Club Instagram and put your order in for one of these things. They're pretty cool. And I've got quite a bit of work into these. I have to fixture them in my machine. I laser engrave both sides of the tumbler. So the basically what happens is it's a black coated stainless steel tumbler. And when I laser engrave the TGC logo on it, it engraves the black coating away to reveal the raw stainless steel. So it kind of has a pop to it. And I put a logo on both sides. But I'm selling these for $25. They are currently live. The pre-order is live on the web store. Go get one of them. They come with 2 different lids and like the metal straw and the whole works. But motel room key rings are still live. I have another batch of those up. You guys know the deal with those. I make those from African Paduke hardwood. Laser engraved, laser cut. I hand sand them. I polyurethane them. I'm making number 1 through 999, and I'm selling them in a chronological order by their order number. So no 2 will be the same. I made like number 280 through like 320, and I don't know where we are right now. We may have crested 300, but I'm making them in like 20 to 40 number increments every now and then, so I don't just like make a ton and then just sit on a bunch. So as of right now, there are 20 to 40 available in stock. No number requests. Whatever number order yours is the number you receive, and no one else will ever have that number. So those have kind of been a cool exclusive, key ring that I've been making with the Governor's Club the last couple of years. So those are live. Stickers are back in stock. Guys, I'm so sorry that the stickers have not been in inventory all the way through. I'm terrible with that. But the Anchor Crest vinyls are back in stock, and they're actually going pretty fast. I made a post on Instagram last week that they were back in stock, and they're going fast. But I've got white, silver, matte gray, and black in stock at the moment. Huge shout out to my friend Phil Can in Massachusetts who cuts those for me. And I apologize, Phil, for always getting to you last second when I need stickers like the next day. So those are currently in stock, guys. Head to the Governor's Club web store. If you're listening on Spotify, there's a link in the Spotify episode here to take you directly to it. YouTube, there's a link. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, just go to the Governor's Club Instagram, and there's a link to the web store right there. But let's go. We'll get into some Instagram Q&As here. I want to do more of these solo podcasts if I finally get a Patreon account started. I've talked to you guys about this before, both on Instagram and on the podcast. It's proving to be more difficult than I wanted it to be, because I want it to be valuable. I want it to be real. I don't want to do anything half-assed with it. If I'm going to start a Patreon and involve you guys and your guys' money, in order to fund more TGC stuff, more exclusive content for you, more basically art from me, all the things that I'm trying to provide, my hobbies that I like to include other people with, both at the Governor's Club, Night Laser, making all sorts of different products, with the podcast, talking to you guys exclusively, and right down to my music too, which I know is subjective. I know some people listen to, certain genres of music and don't like others, but I want to include my music, The Rising Sea, into a Patreon as well, where, you guys are getting exclusive stuff that I'm working on. Even if it's short videos of me working here in the studio, working on different things that I'm writing, and you guys can kind of see the writing process or my writing process. And I think that'll be motivational for me to do more writing, because that's been the thing that I've wanted to do more of. That's been difficult to do. So the idea of putting a Patreon together has really been stressing me out, because I don't want to feel like I'm faking anything. I want to make sure that everything I'm doing to the best of my ability with you in mind. So any Patreon tier that you're on, like, you're getting, that you're happy, you're stoked, you're happy that $5 a month or $10 a month is that you're excited about it. That's allowing me to give you guys product, content, and exclusively too, because I want to start doing a Patreon only podcast as well. And those would probably be solo ones. It'd maybe be like a 15-minute to 30-minute, hopefully weekly, definitely monthly, because that's what the tiers work on with Patreon. But, if there's 5 people, hopefully, maybe through 20 or even more people on there, I'm talking to you guys specifically and exclusively. And I can actually, I can actually like integrate with you guys and talk more exclusively with you. That way, if you guys have different questions, I can answer them more thoroughly or in detail on a podcast. And yeah, those would probably be where I'd want to do more solo podcasts, where it's just me, a little bit more of an intimate setting where, yeah, it's just me talking to you guys. And then the regular Purpose and Passion podcast episodes would be with guests and friends and all that. But that's also still on a front burner. I'm really, with all the move stuff going on right now, it's really been difficult to take like an entire day to sit down and look at the computer, and start doing all that. So that is still fluid in my head. I'm trying to move on that as well. But I wanted to get that out of the way too, because I almost forgot about that. But as far as Instagram Q&As go, this one's going to be kind of difficult. If you're watching on YouTube, I actually just wrote down some of my answer notes in my notebook, but the questions themselves are on my phone. So I'm going to kind of bounce between the two while I continue to sip on this cold brew, as I try to get away from the mic when I'm doing it, so you guys aren't listening to me actually drink this stuff. This stuff is really good though. My goodness. I usually like sweetened coffee because I haven't been able to get into black coffee. I'd like to, but man, it's just too stout, too stiff. But this Stoke, it's technically black. It's a black coffee, but it's the chocolate flavor. It's called their Not Too Sweet chocolate. Man, it is so good. It is so good. And it's not like white either. It's not like filled with cream or anything like that. So it makes it feel like you're actually drinking a coffee that's not too bad for you. Okay, so getting into the Instagram Q&As. We'll kind of breeze through these. Truls Venman, who's a frequent on the podcast, he asks a lot of questions, which is awesome. Truls Venman says, if possible, where would you travel next year outside of the U.S.? So this year was supposed to be a pretty big travel year for me. 2020, I was planning on going to Japan and Russia this year, and I haven't been to neither. And I've been traveling abroad every year for the last 6 years now, and this year was like the year I was going to a couple new countries, and obviously the pandemic put an end to that. So that's been a major bummer. So assuming next year is, a back to normal year, I would like to hit Japan and Russia. Ruslan, who puts on the Grounded show in Sochi, Russia, has invited me out again. Was supposed to be out there this year. That didn't happen. So next year, we've already been talking here and there about next year's show. So as long as that is on and travel is back to normal, I'm planning on being in Russia. Going to spend some time in Moscow, hopefully, some places that I've always wanted to visit, and Japan. Like, I don't even care where I go in Japan. We've got some friends over there, but I've always wanted to go to the Tokyo Auto Salon just because I have a lot of English-speaking friends from both America and England that usually go, and they know the lay of the land, but I could stay with them. But I do have friends that live in Japan that I'd love to kind of see the country with as well. Mason Gavin asks, what would be your top three wheel setups for the Century? So I'm currently in the process of going from a 17-inch wheel up to an 18-inch wheel on that car. And if you've seen photos of the Century, yeah, the 17s look small. But the reason why I went 17s is all of the suspension work I put into that car was to lay the engine cradle flat out on the ground. So I built all new front strut assemblies and had to modify my tension rods, tie rods, lower control arms, and notch a bunch of stuff. And I didn't bastardize the car, but all the suspension modification I did was to ultimately get the car to lay flat out on the ground. Now, the inner wheel wells are structural in that car, like the actual inner wheel tub itself. Now, they are pretty shallow, and I'm not going to cut those out of the car. They only built 430 or so of the long wheelbase Toyota Centuries. So that car is worth just as much stock, if not more stock, than it is resto modded, I guess you could say. So I'm not, for the sake of being able to lay that car out on bigger wheels, I'm not going to cut the car up and modify it too much more. So when the engine cradle lays out flat on the ground in the Century, that inner wheel tub is actually sitting on top of the tire on a 205/40/17 basically. So if I go up to an 18, which the car really calls for, the car's got huge wheel arches, just a big car. The car would look best on an 18 or 19 inch wheel. But anything larger than that 17-inch wheel, it's going to lift the car up off the ground ultimately, because the wheel tubs are sitting on top of the tire. So that's actually been stressing me out, because I put all the work into the suspension to lay the car out, and I've got this weird addiction to having everything lay flat on the ground. Like everything, like the Corvair, the 700, everything like touches the ground. And so I've kind of been stuck in this weird rift of, well, 18s will look better on the car, but it'll lift it. And to be honest, it'll probably only lift it, basically a half inch, depending on what size tire I use. It's not going to be much. But at the moment, there's a few contending wheels that I am searching for the Century. I don't want to really give them away. I kind of want to like unveil it on Instagram if I can acquire the right wheel. But I will say this. I want something that's like an elegant looking wheel, maybe like a mesh wheel, not necessarily like a 5-spoke. I thought maybe a 5-spoke wheel would look good on that car, with like the contrast of like a motorsport 5-spoke wheel with like the actual symbol of elegance and luxury. This is the Toyota flagship car. So although I would challenge myself to put that type of wheel on that car, I really would like to find like a mesh style wheel that's got more, or a numerous spoke wheel that's got more of like a luxury, elegant kind of look to it. But yeah, there are a few wheels that I'm currently searching for, but hopefully I can make something happen before Ocean City at the end of September, and kind of surprise you guys with that. Because I've test fit some 18s. I haven't posted any photos yet. The photos have really motivated me. They've made me quite stoked about 18s on that car, because it looks amazing on 18s. It really does. So I've got some suspension work to do in order to fit 18s. I have to re-separate my front strut assemblies and lengthen them a little bit. When I first built the strut assemblies, I made them a little bit too short. I just miscalculated on a few things. So basically, if I run an 18-inch wheel with a tire right now, the tire would hit the bottom bag perch, the airbag perch. So I've got to cut some welds and re-lengthen everything, and re-weld everything up, which is kind of a bummer because it's quite an involved thing to do. But between now and the end of September, I'm planning on getting that done as well. So moving on. My buddy Greg, the Swoops, said, how are you going to handle when I steal Corey from you? So Corey actually, was it last week? No, 2 weeks ago, Corey actually went out to New York and stayed with Swoops at his shop for a whole week and worked with Swoops in his shop. And so that was really cool that those two guys got to work together. Corey was super excited to go out there because Swoops has a phenomenal shop. If you guys go back a few episodes here on the Purpose and Passion podcast, I actually sat down with Swoops on our way home from Tennessee, and I can't remember what number episode that was, but it was an awesome podcast. I would like to get him on another episode in a quieter environment. We did the episode out in his shop, and the acoustics weren't really the best, but Greg is the best. But to answer your question, I don't know. I think Corey really wants to go somewhere where there's no snow. So I think I might have to ask you, how are you going to handle it when I steal Corey to Tennessee? Good sir. But Corey's a grown man. He can do whatever he wants. He can make up his own mind. But we can't stop the snow from coming. That's for sure. Even in New York. B-Dart67 says, what vintage American truck would be the best to start with for a road course build? That's actually a tough question, because all American trucks are straight axle rear end trucks that are usually leaf spring. And if they're not leaf spring, if they're coil sprung, they're a 4-link with like a panhard bar or something. So that's not necessarily best for road course driving. I mean, I don't race, so I can't say. My dad used to race, and so I don't know. People could argue live axle versus independent rear suspension all day long. For what I know, you want an independent rear suspension. I mean, that's basically why independent rear suspension exists, is you get better travel, range of motion, better grip to the ground. I would assume like an S10 or something small, something nimble, something light, like an S10 with, either a small block Chevy in it or an LS. But it's a pickup truck, so you don't have a lot of weight in the back. So you probably want a power to weight ratio that's not crazy offset, because then you're just spinning your tires. So, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind would be like a first or second gen S10, something small with maybe a European or Japanese power plant in it with an independent rear suspension. So definitely not a stock American truck. I don't know what you have in mind for a project, but yeah, I don't know. Or maybe like a Nissan or Toyota, like a Nissan hardbody, some small pickup truck, that's light. You could do like a small Toyota 80s Toyota pickup truck with a JZ motor in it or something with an independent rear suspension, or like a Nissan hardbody with an S13 rear subframe and rear end, with strut towers and a full S13 rear end. And I've seen people do that before. Now you've got an independent rear suspension, but you've got like a, like an RB setup in it or something like that for a motor. But I don't know. That'd be a difficult one. That would definitely be a difficult one. Talia Sophia says, if you had to drive one car for the rest of your life, what would it be? That's probably more difficult than what's your favorite band? Yeah, I don't know. I put some thought into that one and I actually wrote it down. I forgot what I wrote down. Actually, it's actually a pretty good answer. So I thought about this and I'm like, all right, if I had one car to drive for the rest of my life, what would it be? And so now I'm trying to think of like all different scenarios I would be in with this vehicle. So if I had one car and I wanted to, and obviously you could talk about different variables to the end of time, obviously, but if I had a car that I wanted to travel out of state with, like go on a road trip, I'd want something that is good on fuel. I'd want something that was reliable. I'd want something that had parts available. And since I live in America, I'd want parts available in America. I'd want something that was relatively easy to work on with those parts that are available. But I'd want something that was aesthetically pleasing to me, something that I liked looking at, something that could be modified and made to look even cooler, but also still be reliable. I'd want something that would have enough cargo space for the Dobermans. I don't currently have the Dobermans, but big dogs. I'd want something that had space for them. I'd want something that could carry payload of some sort. Like if I had to go get lumber or something I could put a roof rack on, something I could fit my bike in the back of even. And, something that could possibly be capable of towing like a small trailer, something small. And I kind of came up with, and I'm sure there's plenty of other answers, different cars that would fit this bill. I came up with a Honda Shuttle. And the Civic, like Wago vans, basically is what they call them. I mean, the enthusiasts call them shuttles, but the 1980s like Civic Wago vans. Now, they offered that shuttle. First of all, I love the way those things look. I love the way they look. And I love the way they look slammed. I love the way they look with wide wheels. They're just a really cool car. And it's a Honda, so they're incredibly reliable. There's parts everywhere for them. The aftermarket game is pretty strong for them. And they also made them in an all-wheel drive variant with a 6-speed manual in the 80s, which is really cool. So in my opinion, a Honda Shuttle, all-wheel drive, 6-speed manual on air suspension. So I'd have that versatility of being able to lay it down, on some wide wheels and make it look aesthetically pleasing while it's sitting in the driveway, but also versatile enough to lift, if I had something heavy in the back, if I towed a small little single axle trailer with it, put a transmission cooler on it and like tow a little trailer or something. If I had to go down a dirt road or wanted to go off-road or, not like a crazy off-road, but the all-wheel drive would help with that. The air suspension would help with that. There's tons of wheel options out there for those cars, obviously, being 4x100. I'm pretty sure they were 4x100. But that'd be my answer. And actually, I put some thought into that one. And I think that's a pretty good answer because it's not like that fantastical car where it's like, a Ferrari something or other. But then you lose all utilitarian aspects by having a Ferrari. You get something small that's like fun to drive. It's zippy. You can turbo it. You can do a bunch of like cool stuff performance-wise to it, aesthetically. And it's also got a bit of utilitarian usage as well. So I think that's what I would do. I'd do a Honda Shuttle. And a 1980s Japanese car with a 6-speed manual is actually pretty cool. Andy Crew asks, favorite Edgar Wright movie? So I am a film nerd. I am a huge film nerd, but I don't really watch too much of that style of film. So Edgar Wright did Shaun of the Dead, which I really liked. I like comedies, but I don't like collect comedy films. But Edgar Wright, I know he wrote, I'm not sure if he produced or directed or all three, Baby Driver. And that's a recent film. If I remember correctly, it's Kevin Spacey, Jamie Foxx, there's a few other guys in there too. That film, it's not one of my favorite movies. I did watch it. It was a fun film. It was pretty good. It had some comedic relief. Edgar Wright did that film. I'd have to say Shaun of the Dead because I like that. I don't know if slapstick is the right word, but I like the British humor a lot, and those films were super super funny. So, Edgar Wright film would have to be Shaun of the Dead for me. And let me see here. Pay216 and Nick Hoff both asked favorite car you've owned. I had to think about that one too. I've owned close to, if not just over 100 cars, and some obviously were just flips. Some were just some daily drivers I never modified, and some were much closer to my heart. I'd have to say my E23, my 1981 UK market right-hand drive E23 I just recently sold. That one kind of encompassed everything I liked in cars. It was a big flagship car. I like big land yacht type cars. But it was also a driver's car. It wasn't like the Century, where the Century's like this big car where you get in it and you just kind of like, you just kind of cruise somewhere, and it's fun to drive. But the E23 was still, it had motorsport in its veins, especially when I was done with it, when it had the 3-piece AC Schnitzer Type 2 racing wheels on it. It had the BBS body kit on it. It was a 5-speed manual from the factory. So it was a driver car. You could like go for a spirited drive in it, but it also exuded excellence, and it was like, BMW's flagship car. So that kind of like ticked all the boxes for me. I'd include the Century in there just because I searched so long for one of those cars, and they're so rare, and like hardly anyone's ever seen a long wheelbase Century in person here in America or elsewhere. So on that basis alone, I think the Century would be a contender for one of my favorite cars, just because I've like finally acquired one. And the Corvair, my dad and I's first roof chop, was the first car we really like dove into. We had tons and tons of time into that car. We like redesigned all the suspension, and we cut the windshield ourselves, and we heat formed plexiglass for the rear window. We did a lot of things on that car that we hadn't done previously on any other project. So those would be my top three, even though I can't really narrow it down to just one. I'd say those are my top three. But let me see. Andrew Comet says, not a question, but I love the Century. Well, I appreciate it, man. I love that car too. And I have blown a little bit of smoke about it, about possibly selling the car. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that with a move, out of state kind of looming right now. I've kind of been toying with the idea. I'm like, well, it'd be one less thing I'd have to like store in Tennessee. It would free up space, and it would free up some money too. It'd be nice to have that money back, but I'm going to do my best to keep that car and just put it away. I'd like to ultimately have that car like for a long, long time, just because I know I'll never acquire another one. But that being said, the Corvair and the 700 are off limits. Like I'm not selling those cars, and I've been offered decent money for those cars over the years. Well, the 700 we just finished like last year basically, but the Corvair I've had done for like 6 years, and that's had a few magazine features. It's been on Speed Hunters, and a lot of people have been able to see it both in person and on the internet. So some people have offered me some good money for that car, but it's just too sentimental for me. My dad wouldn't care if I sold it. He'd be like, this is what I love helping you do. Like we build a car, we bond doing it, and then you get to make some money selling it. But yeah, I haven't been worse for wear or hard off enough to to need money that bad to sell those cars. So as far as I'm concerned, the Corvair and the 700 are the keepers. And so ultimately, if I'm looking at my cars as equity and I want to sell one of them, the Century, unfortunately, is the one that would be on the chopping block, even though I don't want to say it's the most rare. For number production wise, it's the most rare, but yeah, I don't know. I'm probably going to keep it. I'm digging myself my own rabbit hole right now, trying to talk about whether or not I was going to sell the Century, but I'm probably going to keep it. If I do sell it, I have to make a few phone calls. There are some friends who are first in the line. I know a lot of you guys have reached out on Instagram. Some of you I haven't gotten back to yet. I apologize about that. First of all, if you message me on Instagram, I need to apologize just in general. I'm not on top of my messages, and things stack up quickly in there, especially just like story replies and stuff like that. So I don't deliberately ignore my DMs. So I apologize if you've messaged me and I haven't gotten back to you. But I have seen a couple messages come in inquiring if the Century is for sale and if it would be, what would I want for it. So I will get back to you guys, because if that becomes more of a realistic possibility of selling the car, I want to make sure I've got you guys all the info you want on the car. But also, Jordan SR Nice says, bro, I love your cars. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. They're fun. They really are. They could be money pits sometimes, but if you play it right, and you don't go too far down the rabbit hole, they can both be fun, therapeutic, and you can make money buying and selling them. So that's kind of where I try to keep it. There's a lot of rabbit holes I could go down with all my cars, but I kind of digress. Instead of diving down the rabbit hole, I just buy more or another one, which stresses me out because I don't have the indoor storage for all my cars. So moving on, let me see. I've got to read the questions off my phone too. My buddy Steve Leffiere. Steve, I don't even know if that's how you pronounce your last name. I've known Steve for years. He lives next town over from me here. Phenomenal fabricator. He was in mini trucks for a long time. And if you listen to my episode with Mo Collins, we talk about Steve pretty heavily. Mo was in the mini trucking scene in like the late 90s, early 2000s, has built some phenomenal mini trucks, phenomenal fabricator. He said, when do I get to check out the BMW? He means the 700. I need some motivation to start a build. This is good because Steve hasn't had a project in a few years now. And yeah, world look out when he does start another project, because it'll be insane. But to answer your question, Steve, you've got my number. Text me. You live 20 minutes from me. Let's meet up. Well, it's sitting in my yard too, and you can see it when you drive by my house. So swing in someday. Or just text me. I'll text you. I'm going to text you when I'm done recording this podcast. Yeah, Steve has some pretty crazy builds under his belt. Hey, I'm Brick says, favorite Audi, old or new? Mine is a 70s Audi 100. Man, I might have to agree with you. A C1 100 is like one of my favorite Audis ever built. The coupes and the four doors. But I don't know, a D2 A8L, the D2 S8, and I know, guys, I know they're problematic cars, but in my opinion, a long wheelbase D2 A8 is one of the best looking cars ever built. It really is. And I've always wanted, because the D2 S8 was only built in the short wheelbase, I've always wanted to do a long wheelbase D2 A8 with an S8 package, suspension, all the motor upgrades. I'd like to do a 6-speed manual swap in one, but in a long wheelbase variant. So I'm sure it's probably been done, maybe, but it'd just be cool to have one where you've got almost like the E23, where you've got a long door, like luxury car that's got motorsport blood flowing through it. An Audi S2, obviously. I mean, I'm a DTM nerd, so having an S2 would be phenomenal. I haven't owned too many Audis. I owned a D2 S8, a short door, that obviously had a bad transmission, and it had a bad transmission when I bought it. So I basically just bought it. I bought it for $200, sold the front and rear bumpers for $600. Then I sold the rest of the car for $600. So it was just a quick $1,000 profit, but the car had a junk transmission when I bought it, which was a bummer because I've always wanted one of those cars. But moving on, I'm fluctuating between my phone and the notebook here. Viquitor_R says, do you think about buying more cars from other countries? Brazil, for example. Yes, actually. Yeah. There's a few different Volkswagens in Brazil that were exclusive to Brazil that I really want. I really want an air-cooled Gull 1, which was a front-engined air-cooled, like almost like a Fox, which were South American built Volkswagens that were available to the North American market. But I'd like a Gull 1, an air-cooled Gull 1 from Brazil at some point. But I also like the water-cooled bay window buses as well. I thought that was really cool. My friend Ross Couples, Ross VW on Instagram and rossvw.com, he's got a massive Volkswagen collection right down the street here from me. And he's got two now. He's got two bay window Mexican buses that are water-cooled. So they've got a big grill in the front with a radiator in them. So they're really kind of iconic looking. You can tell what they are right away because it's got this big grill with a radiator in the front because it's water-cooled. But yeah, so I'd love to import a car from Brazil at some point. My buddy Steve Gray, Sasquatch 16 valve or 16V on Instagram, says all-time favorite BMX rider. I thought about this one too for a bit because I went with most influential. Like when I first started riding BMX, the riders that influenced me the most were definitely Brian Castillo. He started and owns Volume Bikes and Demolition Parts. Brian had a part in Ride Industry, which was the first BMX video I ever bought. And his part in that film forever changed my life with BMX. Mark Gonzalez, the Gons, he was in a lot of old Els Bells BMX videos in the early 2000s, late 90s, and also in a few early 2000s Ride BMX videos. The Gons was one of the first guys I ever saw ride brakeless. One could argue he started the brakeless craze and did all sorts of real crazy fakie tricks and just had a style all his own. Another guy who also led the way in brakeless riding in the early 2000s was Rat Boy, who is John Wrigley. I don't know if he was from Arizona, but all the parts I ever saw him ride, or all the video parts I saw of him riding, were in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area. And there's a wedge to wedge in Scottsdale under a bridge that's just known as the Wedge. And they actually built a skate park next to it called the Wedge because this place was just an area where it was like a naturally built skate park for the most part. And a lot of clips and all the videos that he was in the early 2000s was him just doing the craziest bar spin and manual combinations on that wedge. So I'd say Rat Boy is definitely one of them. And John Engelbert, Lucky, who the Lucky Grind is basically named after. Lucky was another real bizarre rider in the early 2000s, late 90s, who had front and rear brakes, but ran a free coaster, which at the time was reserved solely for flatland riders. And so it was really cool to see Lucky's style. He was a street rider and rode a lot of skate parks too, but he did a lot of really cool, like fakey backwards sliders, but had a free coaster. So he wasn't pedaling backwards when he was going backwards. And it was just real bizarre to see that style on anything that wasn't just like a basketball or tennis court, flatland rider. So I'd have to chalk it up to those four guys, probably for sure. I could go on and on about different riders that are my favorite, that, guys that became friends of mine. I mean, in 2009, Brian Castillo put me on Volume. I was honored to ride for Volume Bikes for about a year, so that was a dream come true, essentially, to ride for, one of my favorite riders. _Jonathan _ I've done some work with Jonathan, ex-race car driver, or maybe even current race car driver. He says, how much Dunkin' Donuts coffee did you have today? This question actually came in yesterday, but I can answer both days. How much Dunkin' Donuts coffee did I have? So plot twist, the K-Cups I have here at my house for my coffee machine are Dunkin' Donuts K-Cups. So I've been brand loyal to Dunkin' Donuts. And yeah, everybody who has seen that they're shutting or that they're closing 800 locations around America right now. Yes, everybody's been messaging me. Everybody's been tagging me in that article. This is just what happens. I mean, they have refused to see any of my stories I've tagged them in. I've been jokingly working on getting sponsored by Dunkin's because I drink so much of their coffee. And I always shout them out on the YouTube, always tagging them on Instagram. I've even got friends in Dunkin' Donuts marketing. It would have been hilarious to be endorsed by Dunkin' Donuts somehow. But now they're closing down a bunch of stores. So to answer Jonathan's question, I had a K-Cup this morning. And then actually this morning wasn't too bad. Yeah, I had a cup here this morning. And then I had an iced coffee from Dunkin's, obviously. This afternoon, I went through Dunkin' Donuts here in town. And currently I'm sipping on the Stoke coffee, so that's not Dunkin' Donuts. But yesterday it was 3. K-Cup in the morning, first thing. Then when I headed over to Danny's house when we were tinkering on the Countach, I got a Dunkin' Donuts coffee on the way over there. Then on the way home in the afternoon, got a nice coffee there. So 3. I'm not like this crazy. I don't drink, gallons and gallons of coffee. I 3 cups a day is usually max. I'd say the most I've ever had would be 4. If I'm up super early, get a coffee super early, then have one at like 9 or 10 in the morning, and then maybe one in the afternoon and an evening coffee if I'm going to be up late working, in the shop late at night or something. So my buddy Jack Dean, I'm going to shout Jack Dean out right now. Jack was in the same house that we stayed at for Vag Fair Brunswick a couple weekends ago. And he was saying how he used to drink a lot of coffee. And I'm like, yeah, well, how much is a lot of coffee? And he said like 20 to 28 cups of coffee a day. And even when I say that now, like it blows my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, 28 cups of coffee? That's insane. So I don't drink that much coffee in comparison to my friend Jack. Parker.Mufasa says, have you noticed a trend in BMX or mountain bike kids looking to cars as a new passion as they age? Yeah, that's definitely a trend for sure. One could say that as a trend that I followed, but having grown up in the family I grew up in, my dad always had muscle cars. He owned an automotive business, an automotive garage. So I was born into a car family. We always had weekend cars. It was a family that had more than one car, more than 2 cars even. So, but I have seen that as a trend. Yeah, more and more kids that I know through BMX have gotten into cars. Some of them share the same story I do, where they'd always been in the cars, but people saw them as BMXers first, and then as they got out of BMX, they got more into cars, and so that made it seem like they transitioned from BMX to cars as a first go. But yeah, that's definitely a trend for sure. We're narrowing in on the last few. Nick Hoff also asked, what's a car you've always wanted? I wrote down a few of these because there are some obtainable ones that I've always wanted, and then there are some that obviously are just way out in left field. But this is like if you ever win the lottery type cars. Obtainable ones, which the first obtainable one, I say obtainable, if I worked hard enough, would be a series of different vintage Ferraris, like a 308, a 328, a 388. I even like the Mondials. I'd take a Ferrari Mondial. I almost bought a Mondial hardtop, like a coupe, that had suffered an engine fire and had no engine. I think Beverly Hills Car Club had it back a few years ago, and they only wanted like $8,000 for it. It was a complete car except no motor. It had the engine fire. The body, it was black, but the body, it might have been red. But you could tell that the body had been burned a little bit around the engine bay. It was a rear engine car. But everything was there. Interior was okay. It wasn't like a fully engulfed fire. Like it was an engine bay fire and it ruined the motor and wiring and all that sort of stuff. But the car was a roller. So I had this freak idea, and thank God I didn't have like just $8,000 to just spend on another senseless project at the time. But I wanted to buy that Mondial and put it on a beetle pan in the worst way. And I really, really hope I'm not like blowing too much smoke now and someone else does it first, but that's still a project I'd love to do. I would love to find like some Mondial that was a loss in a way. So I wouldn't be taking like, not that too many Ferrari guys would care because it's a Mondial, but to take one that like would need full restoration or was just a total loss and do that kind of swap to. So it was almost like my 700 where it's like, listen, this car had no future unless we did something like this. So it'd be really cool to have a Ferrari Mondial slammed on the rockers with a stinger pipe coming out the back with a Volkswagen Beetle air-cooled motor in the back. That would just be the coolest thing in the world, in my opinion. But I digress. A vintage Ferrari, like a 308 would be amazing. The GTBs are super valuable now, unfortunately. The GTSs are a little bit less, last I checked, at least the Targas. I don't want a Targa. I'd rather have a hard top, like just a coupe. But on the same note, on the totally other end of the spectrum, a Mopar K car. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Like, I love the Mopar Chrysler K cars, the Reliance, the Omnis, all that stuff. Not quite into the Shadows, but the 80s K cars. I would love to do a K car wagon, like a grandma spec, cream puff, sat in the garage, went to the grocery store and church just on the weekends, basically. 20,000 mile cream puff car to like bag on like a nice set of RSs or something. Locate the Chrysler 2.2 turbo motor with the 5-speed manual behind it and swap that, because that was a motor that they put in like the Dodge Omnis, which were a K car as well. So yeah, I've got a bunch of real weird stuff I'd like. An early Skyline, like a 2000 or a Haku, that's on the bucket list as well, and obtainable. If I sold a few cars and just saved up some money and stopped spreading myself thin financially, I could just buy one. But every day that passes, they become more valuable, it seems. But then the unobtainable ones are notably a 50s Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing. That's like top of the list dream car. Like, that's it. Like, that's like the dream car. An Evolution 2 190E Mercedes, which is again way up there now, or a CLK GTR Mercedes, which they only made like 24 of or something like that. I mean, those it's funny that the 3 unobtainable dream cars are all Mercedes, but yeah, that's not just one answer. That's like a handful, obviously, but that's what I'm always thinking of when I think of like dream cars, I suppose. DL3R _ says, thoughts on H2O amid COVID-19? It's a good question. It is. This is a question that my friends and I have been talking about quite a bit recently, because we are a month and a half-ish away from that weekend. And I am planning on going. This is obviously depending on where we're at and what's going on, specifically what's going on in Maryland and in Ocean City, as far as cases and whether or not places are open. I'm not, how do I put this? I am aware of what's going on. I'm not ignorant to the fact that there is a contagion out there, but I'm not putting my life on hold either. When I travel and I go somewhere, and I've been around some people and I come home, I give myself a few days, even though it probably should be more than that, before I even see my parents. I practice really good hygiene as it is. I get sick easily. I've got a decent immune system, but I feel like years ago, I used to just always get sick. I was just always getting sick. And so the last few years of my life, I've been really, really stringent on always washing my hands, not putting my hands near my face when I haven't washed my hands, not eating food without washing my hands, just, not being a close talker, just having like good proximity between people, just in general, before this whole thing. So with what's going on, especially now where we're at now, where we understand a little bit more about what's going on, at the beginning, obviously we had no idea. And so the whole shelter in place thing was a little bit more serious. I mean, it still is in certain ways. I'm not trying to make this a COVID conversation, but basically what I'm getting at is, if case numbers are low and businesses are open in Ocean City at the end of September, my friends and I are going. We're going to go cruise the strip. We're going to eat seafood. We're going to get fractured prune donuts. We're going to get coffee. We're going to have a Governor's Club meet, but we're going to have a Governor's Club meet that is safe. And we're going to, the parking lot that we normally have the Governor's Club meet in is in a giant park and ride parking lot over Route 50 on the mainland off of Ocean City, off the island. And it's a huge parking lot. I mean, massive. And we usually have like 300 to 500 cars on that Sunday night. Usually it's usually after the mob has left, because we do it Sunday nights and a lot of people leave Sunday morning, and Saturday night's usually way too crazy. So I always hold the TGC meet. It's usually like a send-off meet or sunset meet. We usually have a name for them on Sunday nights, and there's usually a few hundred cars there, and the parking lot we hold it in is never filled. I mean, that parking lot could hold, probably more than 1,000 cars. So right now the plan is, as long as we can go down there, we're going to hold a safe meet. We're going to make sure everybody knows that we're just going to distance ourselves, and we're just going to be safe. So that's basically my answer. Obviously, if Maryland's cases are super high and it's like a hot zone and Ocean City's, not encouraging people to come there, then we take that as it comes, which would be a bummer because, it is what it is ultimately, but it'd be nice to go down there. I've always dreamed of owning a Century and cruising it on the Ocean City Strip. I've been going to Ocean City since 2009, and I've wanted a Century since 2010, or right around 2009. So every year that I've ever been in Ocean City cruising the Strip, I've always envisioned cruising the Strip in a Century and, having procession flags and just, it's a Strip cruiser car. So those are my thoughts on it. We'll see how it goes. I am making plans to be there and just keeping my eye on what's going on down there. And we'll make a decision as the time draws nearer. But yeah, I hope everything starts to clean up. I hope people do their part right now in order for cases to go down and we can get back to normal life, because I know we all want that. So we'll see how it plays out. But hopefully we see all you guys in Ocean City at the end of September. Rusty_Mark1 says, out of all the Volkswagens you've owned, what one was your favorite? Again, I wasn't able to pinpoint just one because I've got a few. So I narrowed it down to 3, kind of like 4. But my Volkswagen, that's really kind of the first car I ever really kind of modified, like with some fabrication involved. That wasn't just like a bolt-on accessory or bolt-on modification. So the Volkswagen will always hold that in my like journey with cars. It's like the beginning of, all right, this part doesn't exist, suspension doesn't exist, we're going to make it type deal. So that's a big part. That car was featured in the November 2011 issue of Eurotuner magazine. It was on the cover. It had a 2-page spread in the content section, a 6-page feature with the 2-page spread centerfold, which was just unbelievable because the car was like kind of just a matte paint, kind of a I hate using the word ratty, but it was just kind of like a ratty Volkswagen Fox. I don't know. But anyway, that car is one of my favorites. My Derby was one of my favorites. That's just a rare car in general. It was a UK market Mark 1.5 Derby. So it was the facelifted Derby. So it had the Mark 1 instrument cluster, had the plastic bumpers, and it went from the round early Polo headlights to those weird square-shaped ones with the plastic grille. It was a 900cc. Again, needed full custom suspension built. So we built custom axles, custom coilovers. Luckily, that car is now in an enthusiast hands. It's been through a couple people, I think, since me. But the guy who has it now has done it well. He loves it. It's on RSs right now. He's got a really cool, I think it's a Carmi front lip on it. And it's in a good home. But that car is super rare. Even in England, it's a rare car. So that's one of my favorites. But in 2013, I had a black on black Mark II Golf GT, which is a pretty rare Mark II. It's not a GTI, it was a GT. Had a specific interior, had red GT badges on it. I bought that off my friend Ross Couples, who I also bought the Derby from. But that was a fun car. So I'd say those 3. If I was going to say the 4th one, it would be a B3 Passat wagon 16-valve 5-speed manual car I had. I had that right before the Fox. I had it while I had the Fox. But that car was the first car I ever did coilovers in. So that was like the beginning, bolting coilovers into a car. That was like my first go with that. And I did a B4 rear end conversion on that car. And I'd only seen one other person do that at the time. This was in 2009. So the B3 wagon, the hatch on the B3 wagon had this like plastic heck blend looking thing, but not as cool sounding as a heck blend. It was like a kind of an ugly rear end. The taillights were real small, and there was like this faded black plastic everywhere around the plate tub and stuff. And so the B4 wagon had bigger taillights, had a nice chrome Volkswagen emblem, and it was much cleaner. It didn't have any of that plastic tub between the taillights around the plate or anything like that. So I had found out that the B4 hatch had the same body shape contour as the B3 wagon body, and they shared the same wiring harness color coordination. So wiring the B4 hatch wasn't really too much of of an ordeal. My B3 wagon had a rear wiper, so I was able to wire in my B4 rear wiper. You had to modify the bolt pattern for the taillight. So you had to drill some holes. You had to open up the main hole where like the actual headlight, the back of the headlight bucket fit through. It was light fabrication, but man, that car looked amazing with a B4 rear end on it. And I only had like 1 or 2 people at shows ever pick up on that, like wagon guys walked around the car. And it wasn't a car that I never even did wheels on it. I just cleaned up the hubcaps and lowered it down and did the B4 hatch. I really wish I'd had the income I do now, because I would have dove down the rabbit hole a bit more with that car. It was a perfect car to be riding BMX full time with, because I was traveling a lot still. It was a wagon, so I had a roof rack on it, but my bike would also fit inside the wagon if it was raining or if it was in the winter or something like that. But it was a 16 valve. I specifically looked for a 16 valve wagon because it was better on fuel than the VR, than the GLX wagon. And, because I was still driving to Florida a lot and traveling all over for BMX. So that was another of my favorite Volkswagens. I wasn't able to narrow it down to just one. Let me see. Last question. 1_slow_K24 says, how did you get into cars and building some badass customs? And 2-part question said, and did you go to school or are you self-taught? So I got into cars, and I've told this story on the podcast, so I'll keep this pretty short. I got into cars because, my father was into cars and not only owned an automotive garage, but was building race cars, was racing cars himself, was modifying cars, always souping them up, so to say, all usually muscle cars. And so I got into cars that way really early on, and then just revisited it myself once the BMX career was kind of coming to an end, and I got the car bug, more heavily. So, but to answer your second part of your question, I didn't go to school. I was, and I wouldn't say I was self-taught either, because I was taught by my father, and my friends and anyone else that we tinkered on cars together with, like Corey Marshall, who's one of my best friends, works in the automotive field. So every day that I'm here tinkering on my cars or working in my laser shop, he's working on all sorts of different cars. So when we hang out and we're talking about different car platforms, he might be like, oh yeah, I worked on one of those, where I haven't. So I learn a lot from a lot of my friends too, who are in that industry and working on other car platforms that I'm not. But I am self-taught in certain ways. I mean, every project that I buy or every project that I dive into, as you take it apart, you learn how it's put together. And, like with my Century, I've never, ever been under one of those cars. I'd never even seen one in person until the one that I bought. So when I started the task of building air suspension for it, and that's a project that I basically took on by myself while I had access to my dad's lift for about a week. I took the thing apart. I took the wheels off, got up on the lift. I looked at how all the suspension went together, called up my friends at Bag Riders and Airlift and said, I need these components, in order to bag the car. I need these for the rear. I need these for the front. And I had to cut my strut assembly tubes off in the front and weld in the universal Airlift, strut bellow bag setups. And, and so that was self-taught on that car just because of what I was looking at and where I wanted the car to be and how I wanted to perform. And so there's you can learn things in every corner. I learned a lot from my father. I still do today. And, so I guess that's, it's all encompassing as far as where I've learned things from. Going to school would have helped for sure. I was just living a totally different life at that time where I would have normally gone to school for a trade. I was getting on the BMX train. I got my first pro sponsorship in 2005, 2 years after I graduated high school. And so the first year I was out of high school, I was still kind of lost. I didn't know where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be in school, but I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I really didn't know. At the time, BMX and music were the two main things that were fueling me. So it was either work on the music thing harder. I mean, I was in a band. I always had like my own acoustic project, doing my own music, but I was always a part of bands too. And we were always playing shows, going on small tours and stuff. I did all that while I was riding BMX. So once I got my first pro sponsorship, I focused on that more. Not only because it excited me and it felt like a dream come true in a way, but that if I stuck with it, that might be able to pay my bills and be an actual career, which it did a little bit, but I never banked any money doing that. I would do it all again. I'd make different decisions along that same road, but when I left the BMX career in my late 20s, it was almost like I was graduating high school again, where I was like, all right, now I'm set out into the world again, but now I need to work on my finances and build equity, because I didn't do that through my 20s. But my friends who did go right to school and go right to grinding, and building their financial resume, like they bought, they worked on their credit, they got their house, they started a family, and now they're 35 and they've got kids in high school or something like that. But I'm 35 and I'm single. I don't have kids. I'm now working on my credit, working on all these other things, because I didn't in my 20s. But when I talk to those other friends of mine, they're like, what I wouldn't give to be, riding or do, to be some sort of professional athlete in my early 20s and just travel on someone else's budget, on someone else's dime, and do all of that, and just to experience it. So when I get super stressed out about work, and I'm blessed. I feel super grateful to be self-employed and be able to make my schedule. But it's a rocky ride. Anyone that's thinking about doing this, maybe you follow me on Instagram, and Instagram might paint that picture of some false reality where it's like, wow, I want to do what he does. I work hard, and it is, when I wake up in the morning, it's super stressful because I have to generate business. And when I get an email from somebody who I've already done work for, and they said, hey, we need more key rings, or we need more cup coasters, or we need whatever, we need more of whatever you've already made us. That is the most fulfilling feeling in the world, because the work is now there. And I'm like, wow, I've got access to money and paying my bills. But even now, 5 or 6 years into doing this laser engraving business, it's still a feast or famine ride. And I've gotten used to that inconsistent income, or inconsistent roller coaster, I guess. So I don't freak out when it quiets down. When it quiets down, now I work on the podcast. I work on the YouTube stuff. I work on my car projects. I work on things that may not be paying me money right now, but I would love them to pay me money down the road. But they never will if I don't work on them hard. So when the commission work slows down, I used to freak out and work harder, which I still do now, but I take it in stride now. I take it a little bit more maturely now. I look at like, well, this week I may not have a lot of commission work coming in, so I'm going to work on the YouTube stuff. I've got a bunch of stuff I've filmed. I'm going to edit everything. Because I do all that myself, and that takes so much time. And most of the YouTube videos here on my YouTube channel don't have any sort of like cinematic value to them. I would love them to. I would love to have more cinematic flair and more time to write my own music for the music I use in my YouTube videos. That's the plan, but that all takes so much time. In order to get into the right headspace for me to write music, I need to be in here with the door closed, my phone out in the living room or just off in general. And I need to spend like a full week or more in this room in my recording studio to get into that headspace. And then I can start piling out the music, and I can start stacking up some tracks and some different like 80s synthwave tracks or something, just instrumental stuff I can use for the YouTube channel. So I've got a fully organic YouTube channel. All the music you hear is mine, and for the most part it is. The most recent edit I just put up had Droid Bishop in it, and it's like some instrumental 80s synthwave. But all the other music you've ever heard in my YouTube videos is my music, The Rising Sea. So it's just, there's not enough hours in the day. That's what it comes down to. And you shouldn't bite off more than you can chew. It's good practice sometimes, where it helps you budget your time, helps you focus, helps you narrow in your focus, and make sure you're being super efficient with your time and making sure you're not wasting any time or treading water or anything like that. But that whole ride just kind of used to be real scary, and now I just kind of take it as it comes, and the car stuff is part of my job too, because if I have a car for a while and I stay on the right side of it, when I sell it, I can make some money doing that, and that helps fund the next project. And then the laser stuff is obviously my full-time gig. But it's crazy. I'm 35 years old. Again, I said I'm single, no kids, and I honestly don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I don't. I'm a free agent of life, and I am just literally winging it. The podcast is is the product of people motivating me to do something that I always wanted to do, but I didn't think it would be worth my time or that people would be interested in it. When I first started understanding that podcasting was a thing, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I never paid any mind to it. And then once I started listening to podcasts, probably 4 years ago, like 2017 or so, I was on a few friends' podcasts, and then I thought, this is something I really want to do. This is something I really could see myself getting into, because I love, all my close friends that know me, they know that I love talking. I love telling stories. I feel like I've lived a pretty, I don't want to say crazy, but I've lived a fulfilling life. I've done a lot of stuff. I've traveled a lot of places. I've met a lot of people, and I want to integrate all of that stuff into the podcast, into the YouTube channel. And in today's day and age, that can be your job. So it's not chasing money. It's chasing good value and good content, because it does matter to me, the product I'm putting out. Just like filming for a BMX video, if one of my sponsors was paying us to travel to California or wherever to film for the team, video, even if it was just an online video or the DVD or something like that, I wanted to make sure that my riding was the best product I could put out. And if you ever filmed with me on trips, you know that I was the worst person to film with, because I'd pull the trick 8 times in a row, and my balance would be off just a little bit, or something didn't look quite right, and I'd want everything perfect. It's the same way with my music. When I'm recording my music, whenever we've actually been in a studio, everybody's hated me, because when it came down to recording vocals, I am my own worst critic, and everything's got to be just right. I've got to pronunciate all my words the way I want to. I need my bends and trail offs to be just right. I don't want any wavers in my voice. And it's just, I try to do everything to the best of my ability. Sometimes I just feel like I've got too many irons in the fire, and that's when it gets to start to be pretty stressful. But to come all the way full circle, being self-taught with a lot of these things, things take longer. And you can learn anything nowadays on YouTube. I mean, there's tutorials for absolutely anything. So if you've got a dream, you've got something that you really want to tackle, something that you want to make a leap of faith and start, just do it. I mean, read up about it, watch YouTube tutorials. If it's like photography or something, I love photography. I know I'm smart enough to know that I don't have the time to dive into that whole realm, but I've watched plenty of YouTube tutorials on photography and tried to learn more about my DSLRs that I shoot my YouTube stuff with, because I love still photography. I feel like I've got an eye for composition, but I'll watch YouTube tutorials about all that sort of stuff and try to better my talents with stuff that I don't even really want to make a career out of. But if we end anywhere, if we end this on any note, let's end there. We'll end on just live with purpose, find what you love and make that your life. And I'm still trying to do that. I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm trying to live by those words too. I'm trying to do my best to build something with my hands that I truly love and I truly enjoy. And I pray that can manifest into an actual career, something that I can make money with and pay my bills and live a comfortable life doing something that I love to do. I mean, I think that is everybody's dream. And if somebody says that's the American dream, that's what I define the American dream as, is in today's day and age, you can literally do anything. I mean, there are families on YouTube making money, having their kid just open gifts or open products. You can do anything. You can literally do anything. So yeah, search deep inside. If you're unhappy with your job, if you're unhappy with your life, what decisions can you make? What healthy decisions can you make to change that, to do something that you do love? So that'll do it for episode 20. I'm glad this kind of turned into a little bit more of a serious chat about that sort of stuff. When I start these episodes solo, I never know how they're going to go. And I feel like I'm always working against myself, trying to get into some sort of rhythm and talk and have a thought process and a line of thoughts that can kind of come out of my mouth fluently as I'm thinking about them. But we've done an hour and a half. This is way more than I thought I was going to do. But in closing, TGC gear, new stainless steel tumblers are available for pre-order right now through Sunday the 8th on the TGC web store. So head to the web store link in the description of this episode or go to the Instagram page, The Governor's Club. There's a link there. Motel room keyrings, stickers. Oh, I'm going to be doing shirts soon too, new shirts. I've got some new shirts in the works that I am super excited about. Like some higher end stuff. Like I'm going to be doing some embroidered like polo shirts, some black and white polo shirts, and top button crew for all you top button crew dudes out there, and some pocket tees. If you guys watch the YouTube videos or any of my Instagram videos, I'm always wearing plain black pocket tees. I love pocket tees so much, and I've never done any TGC pocket tees. That's coming to an end. I'm going to have some TGC pocket tees ready, hopefully ready for Ocean City, Maryland at the end of September, and then Riverside and Chattanooga on October 3rd, the following weekend. I'm hoping to have some embroidered collared polos, the pocket tees, and a bunch of other stuff that I'm currently trying to work on, stuff that I'm excited about. As always, we'll have a new keyring for Ocean City, Maryland. As you know, the last 6 years now, as you guys know, I've always done a different keyring for the TGC meet. It becomes just a like a scavenger hunt, collect them all type thing while we're down there anyway, because I've got kids, trying to get key rings at red lights while I'm sitting in traffic in my car. So this year, I already kind of know what I'm going to do. They will most likely be an all leather, because I've done some all leather ones before. Last year was an acrylic and leather one, an acrylic tag with a leather loop holding the split ring to them. This year's going to go back to an all leather key ring, which are way more versatile to have in your pocket. They become a better product with use and age, like a baseball mitt, they just wear in and they become this awesome patinaed product. But I'm going to use this bright, vibrant blue leather I have, and I haven't used much of it, but I've done a couple key rings with them, with that leather in the past, in the last couple of weeks. And so I'm going to use this bright blue leather for the Ocean City TGC key rings this year. Still working on the design, but again, we'll be limited to like 100 or 150. Might ante up and do 200, but that's it. As always, it's like they're gone when they're gone. Last year I was sold out before we even had the TGC meet on Sunday. So more about that as that comes together. Hope to see you guys in Ocean City. Hope to see you guys in Chattanooga for Riverside, and maybe things will work out to where I am actually moving to Tennessee in October as well. So all of you guys in the Southeast, even as far south points to Florida, excited to be able to be in that area here pretty soon, hopefully. So thank you guys so much for listening. This has not been easy for me. It's not. It might sound easy. This has been very difficult, this whole podcast thing. I'm hoping the next few episodes I get some really cool friends on here, some people that you'd like really be excited to listen to. The solo ones, I don't like for content purpose. I feel like I'm just like a broken record half the time. But all of you guys that do message me after I do these solo ones, it honestly means the world to me. You need to know that. Your words are heavy, and they serve as serious inspiration and motivation to me. So the fact that, there are people out there, you guys out there that enjoy listening to me just sit here and talk about my life and things that I've either experienced or things I want to do or passions or whatever, honestly means the world to me. This is so important to me. So thank you for that. And I'm hoping that through like some sort of Patreon type page, like I can like bring value to you guys and work harder for you guys. So hopefully that'll come to fruition soon too. So I hope you guys are safe. I hope you're well. Hope your family is well. Let's talk soon. Follow me on Instagram, John, JOHN .Ludwick, LUDWICK. The Governor's Club, Night Laser with a Z. The Rising Sea is my music page. Again, I keep blowing smoke. I'm trying to do more with that. If I move, maybe I'll get to settle in and work on that more too. But thank you guys for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.